love to kind of start off by doing like a little bit of a rewind, which to establish like background for people. Yeah. You know, you're obviously Amy Lou, you're the founder of Tower 28, but you started somewhere. So I kind of like to rewind and go like, how did you get your start in the beauty industry, and what's your background like a little bit?
Yeah, so you mean professionally?
Yeah, professionally, yeah.
Yeah, so I graduated from college really not knowing what I wanted to do in life, and my first job I actually took was in consulting.
Okay.
And that turns out to be the only job I've ever had that wasn't in beauty. So I've worked in the beauty industry now for 22 years.
Wow.
It's been a minute, and I went from L'Oreal to Smashbox to Kate Somerville to Josie Maran. I took about 4 years off in between and worked for a bunch of consulted for small indie beauty brands in LA. And then about 6 years ago, I raised some money. 5 years ago, we launched, and here I am.
Wow, it's wild. When you said you've been in beauty for 22 years, I was like, so did you start when you were 8? Like, like that doesn't, like, I'm
I
like,
got
math.
3 kids.
Math ain't mathing for me. You look like you're 30 years old. So
Kind.
yes,
Make it work, right?
whatever you're doing. You've been with all the big ones. I mean, everyone that you just named are like really big, iconic brands. Obviously, you spent time there and building your career. When you were there, did you ever envision starting a brand?
I mean, I envisioned and hoped for it the entire time. So I went to business school. So in between consulting and going into beauty, I went to business school at USC, which is obviously local to LA. And my intention was to switch careers. And simultaneously, my concentration was entrepreneurship and marketing.
Yep.
I always had a dream of being an entrepreneur. My dad was an entrepreneur, and I really looked up to him, and I really saw all the highs and the lows of it, but overall just how passionate he was about what he did every day, and how it didn't seem like he felt like he was working because he was so vested in what he did. And so I always grew up thinking that's what I wanted to do. Yeah. But I am also pretty risk averse, and so I grew up in a home where my parents were immigrants. They really didn't believe in like having debt. We lived very, they were very frugal. So even my dad, I would say, despite the fact that he was an entrepreneur, he definitely would have told you that he didn't do it because he wanted to, and nor was he doing it because he was incredibly risky. He was doing it because he really felt like that was the only option as an immigrant. English was his second language. He didn't feel like he could succeed to the level that he wanted to without doing it on his own. So he was an entrepreneur that mostly worked with other, frankly, Chinese-speaking people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was kind of what I always wanted, and I kept telling myself I was learning on someone else's dime. I was getting a seat at the table. I was really good at telling someone else's story, and I was really good at being a number two, which I think is actually for anyone out there that is looking for advice. I think that's a great way to go about things. Like, I think it's a great way to learn. And it's certainly been an invaluable part of my own success today is that I have the opportunity to learn on someone else's time.
Yeah. You mentioned your parents are immigrants, which how was it growing up being an Asian immigrant here? And like, did that help shape kind of even your later life adventures?
I mean, absolutely. Yeah. And I think it also shaped me, the way I think about beauty today. Yeah. So I grew up, when my parents moved to Minnesota. I was born in Minnesota in the Midwest. And then from the time I was 5 and on, I've lived in LA, basically, like different parts, so Inland Empire, San Gabriel Valley. I've lived in LA. And I think I grew up in a time where you have to remember, like, I'm 46 today. So I grew up in a time where I didn't see people who looked like me in the media. And I didn't see people who were in pop culture that were beautiful and that looked like me. And so I think a lot of it today has affected like the way that I think about the way I want beauty to be portrayed and how I think about aspiration and the way that we sell beauty products. Yeah. So a lot of it is like, I think even a lot of the things I do, both like personally and professionally, I think a lot about my own values around, you can call it DEI, but really it's more like how we define and establish beauty and aspiration, because I think that's a lot of what we do.
Yeah, and you even think about probably growing up and all those years ago, which again, 46. I swear to God, people look at her, she looks like she's 30 years old. But if you go back to that time and thinking about what you were going through and how you were raised, knowing what was in your future, knowing that you were going to be able to have an impact on how other people see themselves is probably really significant.
I mean, I had no idea that I would have an impact on any of that. And I think if anything, it all makes sense in hindsight. I don't know if you feel like that about your own career, but like I look back on things and I'm like, oh, no wonder this happened. It makes so much more sense now. But at the time, it felt really scary and like I didn't know what I was doing. I don't know if you know, but I named Tower 28 Tower 28 because it is a real lifeguard tower at the intersection of Santa Monica, Venice. So that area is in specifically like Santa Monica and Venice are really different. Different municipalities, different governments, different like police. And you can feel the change when you walk into Venice, right? You can smell the weed in the air. You can see people getting tattoos on the boardwalk.
1,000%.
Like it's a really different place. And like obviously, or maybe not obviously, but in Santa Monica, you see like the double strollers and the tourists and it's just a different place. But what I love about that particular location is just you see every type of a person. And that's what I really wanted Tower 28 to be was we like to call it a safe space for sensitive skin. And I think lifeguard towers are this sign of safety, but also that beaches are this place where everyone gets to enjoy like a clean and healthy lifestyle. And that's really what we wanted Tower 28 to be.
Yeah, I love that. Even you just mentioned, skin, obviously, and being safe for all skin types. You grew up with eczema, right? Yeah, and looking at you and you're glowing and like adulthood, a lot of times we have different skin than we had when we were growing up. You know, whether that's acne or eczema or something. Some things, of course, like stick with you. My husband has psoriasis and he's had it his whole life, so it's always with him.
Oh my God, he needs to try our SOS spray.
No, he literally does. So when you were growing up and you had eczema, what was that struggle like? And obviously it shaped the line you eventually created.
Oddly, I didn't have it as a kid. And they say that 1 out of 5 kids has eczema, which is wild. Wow. That's a lot of kids.
That is.
I didn't get my eczema until I was basically towards the tail end of college.
Okay.
Which also means that I have had it the entire time I've worked in the beauty industry. Wow. And I think the combination of having a chronic skin condition that showed up on my face, on my hands, and on my legs, it used to show up like in the kind of like the crevices or in the crooks of your elbows, behind the knees.
Yep.
In really public places for me, but then at the same time working in the beauty industry where I don't know if you feel like that working in beauty, but sometimes I think we give ourselves a lot of pressure, even if no one else says it, where you're like, oh, I should have like perfect skin and I should know how to use my makeup. And listen, I'm not a makeup artist and I have never had perfect skin. And so I think, but if you're in the position I was, which is I've always been the person who met with like the retailers and I was selling the next latest and greatest skin perfecting potion. But then I was also the one crafting the messaging because I always worked in marketing, crafting the messaging to help try and sell products that were supposed to help achieve this aspiration of like perfection, which I also think is kind of a failing of the beauty industry.
Yeah. I mean, inclusivity goes like, I think when you think of beauty and you think of inclusivity, it's not just, yes, it is skin tone. Yes, it's like, but it's skin type, right? It's
totally.
It's dealing with eczema or it's dealing with psoriasis or dealing with just acne. I mean, there's so many things that pop up. And so inclusivity is also representing those people in your products, not just selling one, view of beauty, obviously. When Tower 28 was coming into existence, when you were realizing the dream, right? Was that kind of the core, the basis of how you built the brand?
100%. I mean, I think the problem that I felt like I saw in the market for myself was that when I looked for products that were safe for sensitive skin, I would go to the store and I'd be like, I have really sensitive skin. What would you give me? And they would always point me to brands that I thought were kind of made me feel like a patient or they felt kind of boring or products that honestly weren't great for people who wanted to wear makeup.
Yep.
Right? So I think a lot of times in an effort to be safe for sensitive skin, a lot of the products are not super high performing and also they're a little more benign, if you will. And then if you look at the products that are clean, so at the same time, I'd started working for Josie Marin. She was really early. Like I would call her like a true pioneer in the world of clean. And so I was simultaneously started working for her. I was pregnant. And so I was, as you know, as a mom, once you become pregnant, you start thinking a lot more about what you're putting on your skin, what's going in your bloodstream. When I tried to make the switch to clean beauty, I actually found a lot of the products that people were pointing to me to either didn't work or were really sensitizing for me because they used plant botanicals and essential oils instead of using, I mean, back then, I don't know if you remember, but it was like, how clean can we make it? And we would put, even at Josie, we would put like 95% natural, 89% natural, like whatever it was, that was considered transparency. And I'm not saying it's not, but for me, the way I think about it, clean is less about how natural can we make it because poison ivy is natural,
Yeah.
but rather can I make it as safe
Yes.
as possible?
Yes. That's really interesting to think about. Like, I've never heard anyone pose clean in that way.
Yeah.
Because you do think like all natural, everything. And often, I think that's always been the issue with the clean beauty space that I've seen people have, is that it doesn't perform, or it goes down. That was almost like the cliche thing about clean. It's like, well, I want to be clean, but I also like want my makeup to stay on my face,
Right.
or whatever. Like,
Which I feel like you previously always had to make some sort of a concession.
Yep.
And what I would love people, hopefully they think this about Tower 28, but this our intention when we make products is always we have to be solving a problem. And for us it is like, are the ingredients clean and good for you? Is it safe for your sensitive skin? And is it actually high performance?
Yeah.
And then wrapped all in that, can we make it like cute and fun and a good price point?
Yeah.
Are you hitting